Welcome to another episode of Joe and The Fatman. Joe Smeltzer, Nittany Sports Now, joined as always by Kyle Fatman Golik of Nittany Sports Now and Mike Farrell Sports, as well as our producer Jay Holahan of Mike Farrell Sports. Another spring football season has come and gone. Penn State played its annual blue-white game this past Saturday, and the white team beat the blue team 10-8. It's hard to tell much from a spring game, obviously. The main thing is that nobody gets hurt, and as far as we know, nobody did for Penn State, which is always a plus. But aside from that, Fat Man, you were there in person, as was I. What were your takeaways?
Yeah, I mean, so before we get into it, obviously, hopefully we get this season some sort of temporary press box. That wind and everything was absolutely insane. So,
Yeah, it wasn't good. I
yeah,
wasn't recommended.
please, Pat Kraft and those that be, even if we gotta do something, please do something. But I know the fans aren't listening to hear me whine about that. Um, I will start with you. I think my biggest takeaways is we'll start on the field. I really feel Penn State is absolutely deep at running back. And I think there are at least 6 or 7 backs deep. I mean, I don't think Penn State's had this kind of depth since the 1980s and the Paterno era. You know, Singleton in the fat man that we all love and know, that Katron Allen, even in the limited time that they had during the non-contact 7-on-7 situation, they were getting to the next level with an essence. So that was huge. Quentin Martin, look, availability is the best ability for him. And, he had a touchdown in the game and he looked absolutely fantastic. Cam Wallace, had some limited rest, but he's coming back from injury. Corey Smith looks good. This is something that really excites me a lot. The wide receivers, you couldn't get much worse than last year. And so, I know the bar set extremely low for the guys, but I mean, as we were driving up to the blue-white game, Joe, we had the news that Trevor Pena had committed to Penn State, which we'll probably talk about in a bit. But my first impressions of Devontae Ross is he is Penn State's legit number one wide receiver. Kyron Hudson is a big body. He's going to be able to do things in space. I think he did have a drop on Saturday, but with the weather that was out there and him getting first time really in Beaver Stadium, it's hard to blame him in a practice. Lyric Samuel had a touchdown. So I like the wide receivers, but I think the biggest news story coming out, Joe, was arguably James Franklin literally saying, we need help at linebacker and we're going to hit the portal. So those are my big takeaways from it. What were yours? I mean, being there as well.
Yeah, Jay, I want to apologize in advance since the blue-white game was not on TV at all this year, and therefore, if you weren't there, you really didn't get to see too much aside from whatever's posted on social media.
Yeah.
But yeah, one guy I want to talk about, and Kyle, you talked about the offense. Darius Dixon was a beast.
He
True
absolutely was.
freshman. We talked about him over the offseason. He's a guy that many feel could maybe not be an impact player, but at least get some playing time, burn that red shirt for Penn State as a true freshman, a big time recruit out of California. James Franklin really showcased his ability to recruit from sea to shining sea by getting him, but he had, I think, 3 pass breakups. It's hard to tell. I don't think there were any official stats, but he broke up a few passes, and then the play of the game, he knocked the helmet literally off of Josiah Brown. And credit to Josiah Brown on that, because he not only held onto the ball, he got up and did the first down signal. So really just a good look for both of those guys. But yeah, I really liked what I saw from Darius Dixon on the defensive side. Going back to the offense, there might really be a competition at QB2 this season. When Franklin said that earlier in spring camp, people were probably thinking, oh, okay, well, of course he's going to say that. Ethan Grunkemeier's the guy, right? But Jackson Smollett's really making a case. This is a guy that really hasn't gotten much of a chance to do much of anything at Penn State. Year one, he was buried down the depth chart with Drew Aller starting and Bo Prabula being the clear second string. Year two, Grunkemeyer comes in, and Smolik couldn't really afford to have a setback, but he had a huge one. Ended up missing pretty much all of the season with injury, and of course that led to Ethan Grunkemeyer becoming QB3 and then QB2 when Bo Prabula entered the transfer portal right before the college football playoff. But yeah, Smolik looked good. He looked mobile. He showcased his ability to throw on the run. He had what proved to be the game-winning touchdown pass, a long one to Lyric Samuel, who's another true freshman that could be one to watch for in that receivers room. But yeah, I really liked what I saw from Darius Dixon. I think with Jalen Kimber leaving, that opens up some options for Penn State at the second corner. Aside from A.J. Harris, I know they really like Zion Tracy in that slot role, but the second guy on the outside, maybe there's an opportunity there. And then Jackson Smolik, man, he might be your QB2, and I don't think that's going to be decided until at some point during fall camp.
Yeah, I mean, can we start to trademark what I saw in that game? Can we call it the Jax pack right away? Because anytime he went and scrambled, it reminded me of the Bo package, 100%.
Yeah, and that's something that they could even use with Ethan Grunkemeyer if he gets that QB2 role. But even thinking to the future, Drew Aller is going to be gone next year. We didn't know last year if he will be back or not this season. Obviously, he ended up coming back, but Penn State has never gone the quarterback out of the transfer portal. I think it's pretty clear that James Franklin is comfortable having guys from within. And to be fair, when you get a guy like Drew Aller right at the start of the portal and NIL era, there's really no reason to dig into the portal. But I think based on all indicators, James Franklin would like to have his starting QB next season be a guy that's comfortable, that they recruited out of high school, that knows the system. And they got two, it seems to be pretty solid options, not just to back up Drew Aller this season, but you got to start thinking ahead. You're playing for potentially the starting quarterback job of Penn State in 2026.
Oh, absolutely. And Joe, I'm going to go to the defensive side of the ball here, but if while as equal as Dixon's performance was, the depth at the edge, at defensive end beyond Anai White and Denai Dennis Sutton is there with Jalen Harvey and Max Granville. Both guys were very impressive. Penn State is blessed to be that deep at that position. LeVar Arrington had a good pass defense of Nick Singleton during the 7-on-7. The one thing that I was left taken away from the blue-white game, Joe, is I think we're assuming, Luke Reynolds is probably going to be TE1 and Khalil Dinkins is TE2. There's going to be, it could be either way in that direction. But, from my vantage point, I really didn't notice much of the tight ends during Saturday. Did you catch anything of the tight ends that I may have missed?
Not really. I mean, they weren't. I don't think they were really used a whole lot, like you said. I feel that Khalil Dinkins is a pretty underrated part in Penn State's offense. Obviously, he hasn't done much in the passing game, but when you're playing behind Tyler Warren and before that Theo Johnson, you don't really need to do a whole lot there. Khalil Dinkins' main function is to block and be physical and then catch that occasional red zone touchdown pass. And I think he can be very good in all of those aspects for Penn State. But Kyle, you mentioned the depth at defensive end. Um, I started to think about something today, and it's because I was writing an article on Drew Aller being the number two, his odds of being the number one draft pick in 2026 or second behind Arch Manning. And we can talk about that later. But the reason I'm bringing it up is because the top four guys on that odds list were all quarterbacks. The number one non-quarterback, former Penn State commit Tamarion T.J. Parker, who is now a starter at Clemson. He plays on the edge, and you notice how no Penn State fans really talk about missing on that guy. And this is a guy that is going to be a top 10, top 5, maybe even top 1 pick, and nobody even really cares that was a recruiting miss, that was a guy that was committed and decommitted. That really illustrates what James Franklin, Jim Knowles, Tom Allen, Deion Barnes, John Scott, all of these guys have built on Penn State's defensive lines over the past several years. And I think it's really telling that having a talent like that slip through the cracks and nobody really noticing, especially with how much Penn State and all college football fans like to find things to complain about, that really speaks volumes to what a machine Penn State has built on the defensive line, and particularly at the edge position.
Yeah, and just the plan that I think Chuck Losey, I'm just making sure I said the name right, correct,
You
Joe?
did. Yeah, you got it
So
right.
the program that Losey's had with getting the weight on these guys, like Max Granville looks big, like 250 pounds big. So does Jalen Harvey. And one of the things I noticed, and look, Penn State got some excellent offensive linemen. Great first step from Harvey, great hand fighting. Always like he's going to be fun to watch develop. I think he's going to be someone that's going to be special. And I'm big on the Granville train, especially after him on the playoff run. Again, it's hard to gauge because, like I said, it felt like Joe on Saturday. We were back in like the 1920s or something. There was like no stat broadcast. There was no replays. There was no printout sheets. There was nothing. It was whatever you saw and whatever your notes were. So like I said, my biggest thing is I think Penn State's loaded at running back. Receivers look better. Edge looks fantastic. Darius Dixon's another good name. And like I said, James Franklin's all points bulletin for linebackers in the portal. Again, I think we're going to start to see, and I think, James usually, I don't want to say he puts up a white flag. That's disingenuous, Joe. But when you were sitting there and I was sitting there during the presser, and he rarely starts to go down that road of, guys, we're thin. Think about the whole charade with the wide receivers last year, the smoke and mirrors, how many of the, I've seen them grow, comparisons, the thief of joy. Everyone's journey is different. I think the room has grown tremendously. I mean, it blew up in the Orange Bowl with 0 receptions. Franklin I think he knew it was weak and he had to play the smoke and mirrors with that because there was no immediate fix with that.
Yeah.
But that linebacker, I think he knows that's a legitimate weakness. I think, again, this is my opinion. I think Rojas is still coming back from injury. I don't think he's as healthy and where they want him to be. The Tamir Robinson transfers really being exacerbated right now. And then even with Kobe King going to the NFL, that hurts. And I think they're going with some youth. I know Anthony Specca had a good one. I heard Keelan Wiley's name a few times Saturday. Joe, I mean, I know we're looking to come to an end here on this segment here, but what do you think? What do you think of Franklin? Like, I don't think I've ever heard James just be that honest about a situation like that with his team. I'm not saying he's not honest all the time, but what I mean more is like when there's like a legitimate weakness like that or a hole. James does what a lot of coaches. You have the coach speak, you masquerade up. He's literally saying we're about to go in the portal and try to find somebody, and literally he actually threw a promo out there. So you tell me what you think.
Yeah. It came across as a little desperate, but it was also honest. Penn State does need another linebacker. Penn State is fin at the position. Penn State does wish Kobe King had came back, hence they offered him a 7-figure NIL package. They wish Tamir Robinson didn't transfer, but that happened. But one thing James kind of specified this was that he feels that the linebackers are okay if nobody gets hurt. But you can't go into a football season assuming nobody's going to get hurt. You can't do it. Like with running backs, we talked about how strong the running backs are. If either Katron Allen or Nicholas Singleton goes down, that's a very bad thing. But you also have guys behind them that can do it. With currently constructed, if one of these starting linebackers gets hurt, what do? You have some potential there, right? They like Anthony Specca a lot. I think Curry Jackson could be a pretty good player for Penn State eventually. But are those guys ready to have big roles right now? I don't really know. So I think Penn State is. It's a bit of we don't know what we have in the linebackers room, but it's also a bit of a precaution because odds are somebody's going to get banged up. That's a sad reality of football. And if somebody gets banged up, you want to be able to have the necessary amount of depth. And right now, there's a lot of question marks with Penn State's linebacker room, and that depth is one of them. With the linebackers, they are, since the Blue White game, there's been two developments. It's been reported that Amari Williams from North Carolina and Muhammad Toure from Rutgers are two guys that are visiting Penn State. Toure is the guy that his brother, who also played a very good blue-white game, Vibru Toure is safety, plays for Penn State. Muhammad Toure is a little older. He was on the Buckus Award watch list last year. Amari Williams is a guy that's going to be draft eligible in 2026 if he plays himself into the draft. But in any case, he's a guy that Penn State could have for a few years too. So kind of a win-win that they get him. So there's options, and you would think Penn State is going to get one of those guys. And Torre seems to make a lot of sense, at least from the outside, because of the family connection and because we all know Penn State does well in New Jersey, which is where both Torre brothers are from.
So just for our listeners, viewers, and everything. So this is what they handed us on Saturday. They handed us the sheet. Just if you take outside of Rojas and like 10th year senior Dom DeLuca, here's what we got.
7-year captain, in the words of James Franklin, but
absolutely a very stellar man. So we have a redshirt sophomore, Dakari Nelson, redshirt freshman, Anthony Specca, true freshman, LeVar Arrington II, redshirt freshman, Kari Jackson, Winston Yates, a redshirt sophomore. I mean, we have Jackson Pritz and Keon Wiley, who are redshirt juniors. Again, there's not a lot of experience. When you start looking at it, how much linebacking experience at the Power 5 level, how many reps are on there? I mean, Alex Tatch is mentioned here as a freshman as well.
That's the guy that I like a lot too. He's the guy I don't know about this year, but I think he's going to be a player for Penn State later on.
When you start looking at the inexperience, I mean, that's where I think James has to be was honest with us. I think that's why the Tamir transfer hurts. It's because he had experience. I mean, he had a lot of meaningful reps last season. So, and I was a big proponent of him as being a player to watch. So, Joe, like I said, we'll be keeping an eye on the linebacking unit for sure, because guess what? It's one of the few times James has been really, really upfront about it.
Who would you guys say was the most impressive freshman on the field?
Darius Dixon.
Dixon? Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, LeVar Arrington had a few good plays, but unless you were from an advanced point of view, Arrington had an amazing first one. Tyke Hayes had a few good rips from running back as well. But if you're not saying Darius Dixon walked out of there, and I think Joe and I both said this to each other afterwards, if he isn't a starter or at least seeing significant PT this year,
wow,
I don't know.
Yep, the thought of AJ Harris and Darius Dixon on each side of each other. That sounds pretty good, but that's going to do it for segment 1 of Joe and the Fatman. When we come back, we'll talk about an incident that, fairly or not, is being talked about probably more so than anything else that happened at this year's Blue-White game. Welcome to segment 2 of Joe and the Fatman. Joe Smeltzer, Kyle Golik, Jay Holahan with you as always. In segment 1, we gave our general thoughts on the Blue-White game, and now we'll talk about a moment during the game that unfortunately is probably being talked about more than anything else that happened Saturday. Here's what happened. A Penn State fan captured a video of James Franklin exchanging words with another fan. We assume he was a Penn State fan, but in any case, he was a heckler. What the fan said isn't captured in the recording, but the original poster of the video, an account called at T1NKERZZ claimed that the fan called Franklin a fraud. It's hard to tell exactly what Franklin's full response was because the blue band was playing as all this was going on, but some words that appear to be made out from Franklin are, quote, "I'd be happy to talk to you about it, and if you want to come talk to me after the game, as well as I'd be happy to have a conversation." At the end of the conversation, Franklin said, "Hey, happy birthday," in a pretty sarcastic tone. There are many that feel the fan was wrong for provoking Franklin, and many that feel Franklin simply shouldn't have responded. Fellas, I have a lot to say about this, but I'll give you guys the floor first. What do you think about all of this?
Yeah. So this isn't the first time James has been involved with this sort of thing. So we can go back.
Not the second time ever.
Yes. So we could go back to 2018 after the Trace Miles Sanders zone read play, and we can look at Penn State blowing a 12-point lead with 6:39 to go in the game, but who's counting against Ohio State for a second consecutive blown game. And Franklin chirped at a fan then, which probably led to his now infamous good to great to elite speech. I don't want to get yelled at again for it. You fast forward to 2023, there was after the whole Michigan game where Penn State simply couldn't air the ball out. They were offensively inept. While Franklin didn't really say anything to the fans, it was, there was I think an offensive lineman near Franklin's side who engaged with the fans in a negative manner, who got tired of hearing the clapping back, and Franklin showed some restraint there. But like as they went through the tunnel, there was obviously the chirping that occurred there. And then last season, after the Ohio State game, where Tyler Warren gets the ball to the 3-yard line, Penn State doesn't get it into the end zone on 4 tries, and Ohio State drains the final 5:13 in the game. There's the, do you want to talk about it sort of thing, and Franklin going at it. So this isn't this is not the first time. But James has to realize, so goes the leader, so goes the culture. So what happens if Nick Singleton gets mad at a fan and goes blowing up at him? What's James going to do? What is James going to say? You can't do that, Nick. Well, you've done it several times. Like, there's a repeated behavior with this, and I get James's frustration. Look, I will. I understand the fan side of it with the big game misfortunes. I mean, we all know it. We don't need to rehash it. But you look at what James has done. Think about it like this. In Joe Paterno's 25 seasons as Penn State head coach, he had 8, 10 or more win seasons in 25 years. James has won 10 or more games for Penn State in 6 of the last 9 years. And you got to think, you had the COVID year that blew everything up in the middle of that, and you had like 2021 where it just injuries piled up on Penn State, and Penn State didn't really have the depth. I mean, if Penn State has a normal 2020 season, that's another. So he's winning games. He is winning a lot of them. He's, think about it. The last 4 games of last season were all big games for Penn State. Penn State split them. And the 2 games they lost, you have the 3-point loss to Notre Dame, and you have, I think, an 8-point loss to Oregon. So the team is playing much better. Like, everything is there. Where I'm befuddled is if you are a fan, okay, and you are at this spring game, why? It's 46 degrees out there. There's 30.
A lot of beers are probably why. And
I get that.
I'm not excusing it. I'm just saying that I would guarantee that factor into it. So
I'm going to invoke Iverson. We talking about practice. That is what literally. If you got your free ticket to the spring game and you're loaded and you want to call James Franklin a fraud, you're an idiot. I'm sorry. There is no room or nothing. I'm not even going to excuse the behavior. Like, if you're that upset from the Notre Dame game, James Franklin in no way coached Drew Aller to do what he did. James Franklin did not coach Cam Miller falling down. Penn State was right in that game. It's unfortunate that they lost, but at the end of the day, they were in it. If you're that angry still, and you're at the spring game of all games, where it's like, it's a diversion. It's like, hey, you're getting that appetizer before, like, you got to wait another 3 months or 4 months or so for the season to kick off. Enjoy yourself. So before I send it to Jay, because Jay hasn't gotten a chance to talk much, and I know, Joe, you're going to have fun with this as well. All I'm going to say is this. James has to be better because he is the most visible asset in the program. This isn't the first time. This isn't the second time. This isn't the third time. The fact that he couldn't keep his cool for a spring game is not good. So I hope he just puts it behind. And for the fans, look, we all have to govern ourselves accordingly. But if you're really gonna badger and heckle anyone from Penn State during a spring game, you're an idiot. That's my thing. You're up, Jay.
That's tough to follow up. That was a pretty good speech, but yeah,
it's a rant.
It was, yeah, it was a rant. It was. I see it on social media, and I'm on Twitter, and that was the only thing you got from the spring game was James Franklin appears to be going at it with the fan. I'm like, oh, great. As I'm sitting in the Philadelphia Union press box, like, this is just lovely. This is the only coverage I get today from the blue-white spring game. So he calls him a fraud, and I mean, if he was loudly going after maybe his family, maybe something very personal, then yes, I understand going and saying something to the guy. But the fact that it was just, how many times has he been called a fraud? I mean, dude, you're coaching at a school where, and he should know, I mean, he obviously knows this. He's talked about it last year with the criticism he gets from the fans and especially from the media, that he understands. I mean, Penn State in this region is the biggest college football atmosphere. People in the New England area, they follow Penn State football, the New York City area, in Pennsylvania, obviously, down here in, the Philadelphia area, and all the way even through the DMV. So I just don't understand why he feels the need to respond to every single time. Like, dude, just leave it alone. I mean, and I agree too with you, Kyle. I mean, if you are someone that bought a ticket and you went in there and you heckled the hell out of James Franklin, that's stupid. That's ridiculous. And to Joe's point, I'm sure he was tailgating in the field out there, having a few too many beers with his buddies, and decided to come in and go after Franklin. It's just like, dude, come on. I mean,
Franklin,
the Orange Bowl was months ago.
He'll make $10 million this year if he does all the things that we think he's going to do.
Exactly.
He's going to behave better.
Exactly.
And I'm glad you brought up this point earlier, Kyle, is that James Franklin would not advise his players to engage with hecklers. I just can't see that at all. But he has said, this is after the Ohio State game in November, which was the previous most recent example of him getting into it with a fan. I'm not saying that like Franklin's done it a bunch of times. There's only been 3 really incidents of it, this being the most recent one. But after the Ohio State loss, a fan had some things to say. Franklin was in the process of leaving the field with his family. Obviously, it was not the best time to be yelling at James Franklin, and Franklin walked up and asked the kid his name, and the kid ran up the stairs, and, we never found out his name. But as you mentioned, with Nick Singleton, Franklin would not encourage him to go after a heckler. And Franklin, in his own case, after that Ohio State game, 2 days later, he had his weekly press conference, and he said he was fine with how he handled it. And that conveys to me that he is somebody who either feels that whenever somebody has something to say to somebody else that they should that the person that's getting yelled at, heckled, should be able to chirp back. The second possibility, and this is something that Franklin would never admit, is that he is very insecure. I shouldn't say very insecure, but there's some degree of insecurity there to where once somebody calls him a fraud, it really strikes a chord. So I think that in both cases, this is just way more ridiculous than after a loss to Ohio State. Because if you're heckling Franklin after an Ohio State loss, you see where both ends are coming from. You see why the Penn State fan is mad, and you see why Franklin is not in the mood to hear any nonsense. This case, as you guys mentioned, the fan yelling at Franklin at a spring game. What is the fan doing? But also, what is Franklin doing, going back and yelling at the fan when there's really nothing, no preceding events that would lead you to be in a mood to where that should be particularly bothersome. So no, I think it's ridiculous. I don't know how often you see this from other coaches. Maybe you do. Obviously, as a beat writer, you're plugged into one team and you don't see as much from the other side. But Kyle and Jay, you follow the national scope. Do you see this happening with guys like Kirby Smart, Dabo, whoever? I
Right.
know Matt Campbell from Iowa State got into it with a fan after a loss a few years ago, but it's not something
Rare.
that college football coaches
No.
generally do, and it's starting to become something that Franklin's known for. And while obviously it's good for people to hear stuff back from the people they're yelling at the end of the day, we don't know the name of the fan that said this. We don't know what the guy looks like. The fan really loses nothing by doing this and having James Franklin come back. The guy that loses the most is James Franklin. And the other two fans that yelled at Franklin, we know their faces. We don't know their names either. They didn't suffer any consequences from this. The guy suffering here is James Franklin. And
Yeah.
it's just not necessary. And I hope for Franklin's sake that he cleans it up, but there's really nothing that indicates that he sees anything wrong with this behavior.
It's a double standard that he needs to fix because it can't remain that way. And look, Joe, you brought something up about James having some sort of insecurity. I'm going to say this right now, and this is going to be for any fan out there that wants to be like, 1-10 or 1-11 against Ohio State and his record against Michigan, this, that, and the other. I'm going to say this for James Franklin. And look, I've been as critical as any on James, and I've even asked him point blank about his big game faltering before. So I'm going to say this. Number one, he has guided Penn State to the most wins in program history, okay, with 13. He has guided Penn State to their first 2 playoff wins. He has coached Penn State to 6 New Year's Six Bowls. He has coached in the Rose Bowl twice, the Fiesta Bowl twice, the Cotton Bowl, and the Orange Bowl, as well as the Peach Bowl. So he's coached in 5 of the 6 New Year's Six Bowl games. There are programs out there, even in this Pittsburgh Sports Now network, Pitt and West Virginia haven't appeared in all those New Year's Six Bowls. James Franklin has. James Franklin, if he were to walk away today, would be in the College Football Hall of Fame. He already has the coaching enshrinements there. He's won a Big Ten championship. He makes he makes $8.5 million base salary. With the incentives, will get him to 10. This guy should have no insecurities in the world. He is one of the most accomplished coaches in the country. He is one of the most respected coaches. You saw this at the Peach Bowl with Lane Kiffin, who likes to troll everybody. Lane Kiffin had the utmost respect for James Franklin. Utmost. All right? And even when, I don't know what Penn State, what more, these lunatic fringe. I'm going to use a Kirk Herbstreit word, the lunatic fringe, because the person at this spring game's a lunatic in my mind, and he's fringe. What more do you want? Sure, you want more winning. We all want more winning. I don't think James Franklin goes into it being like, okay, I need to roll over and lose to Ohio State again, or Michigan again, or lose in a playoff again. That's not how he's wired. There's so much success, you got to appreciate it. And I think for James, for him feeling the need to go after these folks, like I appreciate the what's your name to the Ohio State person. That person's a punk. And if he's watching, he wants to come on here and try to justify himself, I will destroy him on here. And he will run away quicker from me than he did from James Franklin. But I'll end it with this, Joe. James Franklin needs to be more secure. One of the most accomplished coaches of all time.
Yeah, and to balance that out, there is that lunatic French that you mentioned, but there also is one on the other side that, and maybe this is me just kind of falling into the trap that we all fall into, to where what we see on X, Twitter, wherever you want to call it, represents real life. There are people that will act honestly like Franklin's career is even in the same ballpark as Joe Paterno's. And it's not. And I'm not saying that as disparaging to Franklin. We're talking about probably, the Barry Bonds, Ted Williams of college football coaches, a guy that if he's not the best of all time is certainly in the conversation of it. James Franklin isn't in that GOAT conversation. You can cherry pick your numbers with, Franklin won more in the Big Ten than Joe Pa did. Hey, Joe Pa was 66 years old when Penn State joined the Big Ten. We're not comparing the two guys in their primes, but that's a debate that we could have. And I the reason I brought that up was simply to show that the lunatics exist on both sides. There's obviously the Fire Franklin crowd, which we agree is ridiculous, but then there's the Penn State football has never been in a better place crowd too, and it's in a very good place, but it doesn't compare to what the team did between 1977 and 1986, which is probably the best stretch of Penn State football ever.
I will say this. You look at what James Franklin has accomplished at Penn State. There are plenty of programs around this country that will give you theirs and they will take yours. They would easily take James Franklin over what they have, and they would, get spoiled and enjoy the success that they have with Franklin. And yeah, they would complain about certain aspects, but look, you do all the things James has done, there's some sort of respect with it. Look, and I think he like Josh Pate always says, he is one of the most properly rated coaches. He's no one's saying he's the greatest, no one's saying he's in the best right now, no one's saying he's top 5 right now. But if you're doing your short list, if you get past 10 or 15 and you don't have James Franklin on your list, you're just delusional. Jay, I'll yield to you.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, it's something that I think is an issue with, as you were saying, Kyle, about all the New Year's Six bowl games. And while we may, as true college football fans, I think identify that that's an accomplishment, it's just a shame because I'm sure that person, and he may have been older, but I'm assuming he may be a student there. They don't recognize those New Year's Six bowl games because appearing in that and not appearing in the college football playoffs during the time span that it was just the semifinals, it wasn't, to a lot of people, viewing it as an accomplishment. I think that's kind of an issue more with, today's era of constantly needing championships to justify whether or not you have had a successful season or you've been a successful head coach. And I'm not saying I'm one of those people that say that, just because James Franklin hasn't, hoisted the national championship trophy, because at the end of the day, only one team gets to do so. He's been an accomplished head coach. He's won the Big Ten. He's done all the things, as you pointed out, Kyle, in his head coaching career at Penn State. So I don't know. It's just a shame that people feel the need to act this way at a spring game of all places.
Yeah, and to clarify one of my earlier comments, I don't know what James Franklin is insecure. It's not my place to declare that he is. I think it's a possibility, but we don't know. Well, we don't know what leads Franklin to feel the need to respond. But what we do know is that segment 2 is wrapping up. When we come back in on Joe and the Fat Man, we'll talk about the NFL draft and where Penn State players landed. Welcome back to Joe and the Fatman. This is segment 3. As always, Joe Smeltzer and Nittany Sports Now, Kyle Fatman Golik, Nittany Sports Now, and Mike Farrell Sports, and Jay Holahan of Mike Farrell Sports. 5 Penn State players went to the NFL Combine in Indy, and those were the 5 that ended up getting drafted. Abdul Carter was the first to go, being selected by the Giants at number 3. Next was Tyler Warren, who went to the Colts at 14. A bit of a surprise there since Warren was not the first tight end off the board as most would have projected. Instead, the Bears, where Kyle and I both had Warren going, they took a tight end, but they took a different Big Ten tight end. Michigan's Colston Loveland was the guy that went at 10. But Warren didn't have to wait much longer, unlike Shedeur Sanders. He went to the Colts, another destination that many saw him going to. He went at number 14 to the Indianapolis Colts. Those were the 2 first rounders. And elsewhere, really nothing surprising. You know, we figured KJ Winston would be a 3rd round pick. He ended up being a 3rd round pick going to the Tennessee Titans. And we figured that Jalen Reed and Kobe King would be late round picks. They were indeed. Jalen Reed went to the Texans in round 6. Kobe King went to the Minnesota Vikings in the same round. Fellas, what sticks out to you about where these 5 guys landed?
What makes me happy is when I heard on Thursday night my boy Abdul became Big Blue. I was over the moon. I wasn't over the moon when he called LT and asked to be 56, but you can't blame a man for trying. I'll give Abdul that. I think when you look at where the Giants are, he has a chance for an immediate impact right away. So love that. Tyler Warren, I think, may end up being in a better situation in Indianapolis than the Bears. I know the Bears up front probably would have been would be better with what Caleb Williams can be with DJ Moore and Rome Odunze, but there's, so from the get-go, it was nice to see Tyler Warren get the Indianapolis Colts pick right after the Bears. Even though the Bears, he would have gotten a little bit more. It would have been maybe a little bit more better situation up front with Caleb Williams, DJ Moore, and Rome Odunze. The thing I like about the Indy situation is they finished dead last in targeting the tight end. So at the end of the day, he's going to be used, and I think he's going to be a pivotal point in that system. Jay, what are your thoughts?
So I thought the same as Kyle. I mean, asking to take LT's number, the worst he can say is no. And he said no. But he's going to be great for the Giants. That D-line is now stacked. It's going to be, in my opinion, a huge strength for them, especially next year. Tyler Warren, though, when I literally saw the Bears take Colston Loveland, I was so peeved because the Bears could have traded back and probably had Loveland. They didn't even need to take him at 10. If they truly liked him over Warren, which I don't know why you would. If anything, maybe he fits the scheme better. But I think Warren and the Colts are going to have a good relationship there. I think that's going to work out well for them. I was glad to see KJ went day 2. He was someone I was curious if he would fall because of the fact that he had obviously been hurt. I thought, would he fall even further than day 2? So I was happy that the Titans picked him. And then for a while there, I thought we would only get 3 Penn State players drafted. And thankfully, Jalen Reed and as well Kobe King went later on. So, yeah, successful draft for Penn State. And glad that a couple other guys were signed as undrafted free agents, which is good, like Keziah Izzard to the Chiefs. And hopefully Julian Fleming to the Packers. Surprise, surprise. But surely he got picked up as well. So, yeah, overall, solid for Penn State football.
Yeah, and I think round 3 was where would have projected KJ to go. Obviously, he could have been a first round talent
Yeah.
had he been able to play his entire junior season, but he ended up getting hurt, and obviously that injury cost him a lot, cost him a lot of money, at least on the outset. But I think he did enough over the offseason to kind of put scouts at ease for how bad the injury was lingering. You know, he didn't do much at the combine. He didn't but he did run at pro day, and he ran decently well, well enough, and he ended up landing in an okay position with the Tennessee Titans. And then Jalen Reed and Kobe King, I think, yeah, Jalen's very versatile. I think that's going to serve him well in the league. I think the Texans got a decent value pick in round 6. And then Kobe King, we all kind of know he's a big middle linebacker, run stuffer. And there was a day and age where being a run stuffing linebacker at Penn State would have led to a big payday. But the NFL is different now. You kind of got to be able to defend the pass as a Mike linebacker, and I think pass coverage was Kobe King's biggest weakness, and that really prevented him from being too high a draft pick. But if he can work on that, he's going to be a heck of a player, and obviously, King's a leader too. He was a starter at Penn State for 3 seasons at Mike linebacker. He was a captain by his last year, and he's the type of guy that could stick around in the league for a good while. Kyle, what are your thoughts on Penn State's later round picks aside from the 2 that we all knew would go in the first round and
So,
did?
One of my first columns over at Nittany Sports Now was about the KJ Winston draft bet, and at the end of the day, you can look at it 2 ways. You know, you could say, hey, considering the injury, considering everything that KJ went through, to still be picked amongst the top 100 is impressive. But, you know, you can also look at it the opposite side. If he was that bullish about himself and that bullish about, like, hey, I know I can be drafted and drafted at this point, you know, what if he would have came back another year, refinement, instead of running a 4.5 40 that we saw at pro day, maybe he gets back to the 4.4 speed. So in my mind, you look at the situation and go, was it a good bet or a bad bet? I think it was a bad bet, but he made his decision. He has to live with it. So Kobe and Jalen are going to be solid pros in the NFL. They'll be around for a while. I think Kobe King is, with the way he's such a downhill linebacker and the way he approaches the line of scrimmage, he is going to be something that is going to be a force in the league. And this is another testament to how good of a developer James Franklin is. Not trying to get back to that, but with Penn State having 5 picks, only Alabama, Georgia, and Penn State are the only programs that have 5 or more picks for 8 consecutive years.
That's pretty good company. That's going to do it for segment 3 of Joe and the Fatman. When we come back, it's the box of mystery. Jay and I don't know what we're going to be talking about yet. Fatman does, and he'll lead us into our final segment of this episode of Joe and the Fatman. Welcome to the final segment of Joe and the Fatman. Joe Smeltzer, Kyle Golik, Jay Holahan. Kyle, Fatman, Golik, this is our mystery box segment. What is in the box?
So in the mystery box, and it's a 2-parter again, but this will be interesting. So we're going to take the story of the weekend. Obviously, I want your guys' reactions to the whole Shedeur Sanders situation. Even touch on the prank call a little bit. Even Tyler Warren got prank called, apparently. So that's the first part. The second part of it is this, and this is the one you got to think about a little bit. So we all saw Mel Kiper lose his absolute mind all weekend. So let me ask, the question to you guys is, apparently Mel Kiper was so into Shedeur Sanders and him being a top 5 quarterback that he was willing to just hijack, sabotage an entire segment and just die on that hill. You know, we all know that saying, what is something you will die on that hill for? Obviously, Mel Kiper Jr. is going to die on the Shedeur Sanders hill for that. and completely hijack. What is one take? No matter it doesn't. It could be in any sort of walk of life that you will die on that hill for. Mel Kiper Jr. style.
I'll react to the Shedeur Sanders. I'll have to think about that for a little bit, but my initial reaction was I had him going because I thought it made sense. Now, if I went based off of like actually evaluating the player and the person, I wouldn't have had him go in the first round. I mean, I agreed. He literally stood up at the combine and said, if you want a guy to change the culture of your franchise, don't take me. So why would I take you in the top 10? You know? But I was predicting the Saints would be that bold to take him at 9, and Joe and I were talking about this off air, the Steelers at 21. When he got past the Steelers, I knew he was screwed. And then ESPN did, I think, one of the dumbest things at 25 when the Giants traded back in. They showed Jackson Dart reacting. If they didn't show Jackson Dart or either quarterback, you wouldn't have known which quarterback it was. Everyone knew it was Jackson Dart. So that's just something off to the side. But when it got to day 2 and he continued to fall, it made the draft such must-see TV. I mean, day 3, people are tuning in, and unless you're a diehard college football NFL fan, you're not tuning into day 3. I tune into day 3 just to really watch where Penn State players go and if the Eagles manage to get some type of a steal. But I'm not really tuning into it for the entertainment value that people were tuning in to continue to see Shedeur drop. So when he continued to drop, I was obviously very surprised. And I was even beginning to wonder, is this guy going to fall completely out of the draft, in which I thought that would be completely crazy. And the whole prank call thing, that was so stupid. I mean, the Ole Miss Jeff Ulbricht's son that eventually apologized for it. I mean, come on, dude. Like, have a sense of maturity. And plus, they filmed it on camera on both ends of Shedeur answering the call and then the guy calling him. So if you literally line the two of them up, which I'm sure someone may, it'd be really interesting to see how that went down. But that was just immature and just downright stupid.
The fan who incited Franklin or the Mississippi kids who prank called Shedeur and put it on and videoed it? Who's dumber?
Who's dumber? Oh, I would say the Ole Miss kids. I think.
Yeah, because they put themselves on video and
exactly.
They're identified. The Franklin guy, we don't know who we're complaining about because we'll never know their names. We'll never know what they look like. So I think, that's an easy call.
And even though that's stupid, at least it's at an event. Like, that guy literally just went out of his way to do that. It was just stupid by that kid. I'm curious to see what the NFL does there, but as of right now, they're doing nothing to the Ulbricht family. But I have to think on part 2.
So Joe, you're up.
Take that I'll die on is cats are better than dogs. I just think that there's such a double standard where if somebody has 4 or 5 cats, they're labeled a crazy cat lady, but somebody can have multiple dogs and they're just looked at as a normal American citizen. That's just absolutely stupid. I don't care if people like dogs better than cats. They can think whatever they want, but there's like a notion around people that like cats that I don't really like. But Shedeur Sanders, my boss at the Sports Now Network, one of my bosses, Alan Saunders, wrote a pretty good breakdown of basically why the Shedeur Sanders drop-off happened, and it was attributed to 2 things. One, his problems as a quarterback. He was a good college quarterback, not a great college quarterback. And 2, organizations don't want to deal with Deion. They don't want Deion looking over their shoulder. And love Deion or hate Deion, the facts are that he's built a pretty solid case in his time at Jackson State in Colorado to where if an NFL team has a coaching opening, they're one more good year, and it wouldn't be crazy to think that Deion Sanders, regardless of being Deion Sanders, just taking what he's done at Colorado and Jackson State before that he would be a legitimate candidate for an NFL head coaching vacancy. So a head coach, a coach at Shedeur Sanders, are they going to want to have to be sweating down their neck, knowing that they might have unwittingly put their job in jeopardy by signing off on taking the guy? And yeah, it's really those two things. The interviews, if the reports are true about the interviews, they probably didn't help. But I don't know how big those interviews were. I think a lot of it comes down to Shedeur's support system and the fact that there's nothing that indicates that he's going to be, the next Patrick Mahomes, Joe Montana, what have you, as a quarterback on the field. As far as the prank call goes, I think there's parallels with this in the Franklin situation. Initially, I was pretty appalled by it on Shedeur Sanders' behalf. That's just not something that anybody should do. But seeing the reaction from Shedeur Sanders' defenders over the past few days, you would think they burned a freaking guy's house down or like stole his car or something. No, it was a dumb thing to do, but I would hope Shedeur Sanders is over it by now, just like I hope James Franklin's over the fan by now. It was a dumb thing to do, but it's something that happens throughout the league. Probably happens every year. Tyler Warren it happened to. Cooper DeJean, I think it happened to last year. It's just a part of the whole draft process. That doesn't make it right, but it also doesn't mean that we need to act like they did something truly heinous to Shedeur Sanders. And by heinous I mean like uh theft, arson, whatever. It was none of that. It was just two kids being doing dumb kid stuff and also being dumb enough to film themselves doing it.
The fact that those Mississippi kids don't even have a proper coffee table and are using a blue cooler as their table is all you need to know on that situation, on who's the dumb one in filming and all the above. My thing with Shedeur Sanders and the whole situation is I just feel from a media perspective, and look, all the three of us on here, we may be fringe media, we may be a step above fringe. We might, I know Joe, we're with the NSN outlet, we're a little bit more dominating in the southwestern PA market in northern West Virginia. But this more goes to ESPN. When ESPN went away from any journalistic integrity and just became this entertainment company where we're just going to troll, like that's all Stephen A. Smith, Shannon Sharp, Skip Bayless is. They
Mel
just
Kiper at this point.
Oh, Mel Kiper is, yeah, for sure. I mean, he should have retired when Jimmy Clausen was a bust. So, when Shedeur, I have look, while you could be turned off by the bravado and the cockiness and the swagger of the Sanders clan, Shedeur Sanders still set an NCAA record for completions percentage in a career. There's something to be said for that. So again, I you look at what look, I'm a huge Knicks fan. Jeremy Lin annoyed the hell out of me with the Linsanity. I mean, we were desperate for anything. And you could see it's a short burst of a person who has that kind of September call up. We're going to use a baseball analogy here, and just goes on a tear. And that's all Jeremy Lin did, But you look at what guys like Skip Bayless has done with Tim Tebow. You look at the whole Caitlin Clark euphoria. You look at, all the above. LeBron, literally all First Take was for about a decade was the Dallas Cowboys and what LeBron James ate for breakfast today. So the whole Shedeur Sanders thing did not surprise me. And it was exacerbated by how ESPN handled their coverage. So I think Shedeur Sanders doesn't help himself at times, but I think the media does a horrible job of being objective at times, especially in the place where ESPN is at. So that was my big take on the Shedeur Sanders things. I just think big media needs to be more responsible because they are truly the stewards. They have an impact to shape narratives. So the stance I'll die on a hill on. So I'm going to give you a music one that'll be obvious if you read my Meet the New Guy article over at NSN, and then I'll give you a sports one. So the first one is I will die on the hill. I will literally go to Abbey Road. I will go to Strawberry Fields. I will go to Liverpool, and I will literally look at any diehard Beatles fan and say the Rolling Stones were better and justify it. And I know, Joe, you and I have gone back and forth with that too many a times in many car rides. So you know where I stand on that. From a sports perspective, the stance that I will die on the hill on is, and I don't, baseball, like baseball changes, and I know there's eras, and Joe, I think this is going to fire you up maybe a little bit. Jay, we'll see. When you look at the various pitching stats in this world, I'll always say, and I will die on this hill, that the greatest pitcher that ever lived was Tom Seaver.
Wow. Yes, no argument.
Dang.
There's only two pitchers that ever lived that won 300 games, had 3,000 strikeouts, and had a sub-3 ERA. Walter Johnson and Tom Seaver.
Yeah, I think any baseball player with a WAR above 100 is automatically in whatever GOAT conversation, and Seaver's was 109.9. So, yeah, that checks out.
For the hill that I die on, I'm honestly struggling to come up with one, but if I could throw one out there, it would be that, in my opinion, analytics have certainly there's some good, but there's some bad. And in the aspect of the NBA, I think the analytics have kind of killed the NBA. Now, the commissioner doesn't do the best job of it, but in terms of the 3-point shot, I think that certainly has become an issue with the analytics and whatnot. So that's a hill that I'd be willing to die on for that.
I'll give you a hill to die on, Jay. Pat and Gino's cheesesteaks absolutely suck, and it's just a tourist trap.
That would, okay, you know what? That would be a food one, is that Pat's and Gino's is not the best cheesesteak spot in Philly. Joe?
Do you laugh whenever you see the long lines there?
No, I don't. I mean, I don't frequent Pat and Gino's too often. I laugh whenever someone says that, though, that, probably Pat's or Gino's, because it's like, I mean, come on, it's not a good cheesesteak.
That's going to do it for this episode of Joe and the Fatman. For Kyle Fatman Golik and Jay Holahan, this is Joe Smeltzer signing off on this episode. We'll be back to talk about more of all that's going on in Penn State sports on the next episode of Joe and the Fatman.
Vote Canada.